Perfect. And Kathy, do you have the poll, the first one? I can't see the polls.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me go ahead and do that. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Hi, everybody. We're excited to have you here and to see you. And as you can see, we've got a poll question and a chat so that since you are here on time, you have something to do right away so that we're not just asking you to sit and wait because we feel strongly about that. Plus, it gives us a chance to know you a little bit better.
We're hoping to be able to guide our conversation to exactly what your teaching scenario is during this crazy school year. So the information that you're indicating in the chat and poll questions will be really helpful to us in how we discuss the resources we want to share.
So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. I think we may have a couple more joining as we get going, but we want to be respectful of everyone's time. We know teachers have a lot on their plates right now. Thank you for joining us for the second session of the ABA FJC Joint Teacher PD Virtual PD series. For those of you, I think everyone on this joined last week, so thank you for coming back. We are excited to be joined by two educators, both of whom are alum of our FJC ABA Summer Teachers Institute. We have Sunshine Cavalluzzi from El Dorado High School in California, and Shoshana Adams from Valhalla High School, also in California. So we are representing the West Coast this week.
Yes.
I am basically going to turn it over to Sunshine and Shoshana, but on behalf of Christine Lamberson at the FJC and myself at the ABA, we thank you both for what you put together for this program. And as a note to the teachers, we will be doing a couple of polls throughout. There'll be some messages in the chat as well. So it's supposed to be a pretty interactive, hands-on activity. We will also be taping this and providing the video with the historical lecture from last week as well. So it's something you will be able to share widely with your networks. So with that, Sunshine and Shoshana, take it away.
And I know we just both want to echo, thank you so much for being here. We're really excited. We both love these cases and love teaching government, teaching the First Amendment, teaching free speech, and getting to talk about it with excellent educators. And it's fun for us as well on a personal note because Shoshana and I met in the fall of 1993 because we were suite mates at UC San Diego and have been BFFs ever since. So it's fun that we now get to teach the same thing and have random bets when our schools play each other in athletic contests, and also now get to talk about something we both love with you that we in a lot of ways fell in love with together, taking the same classes about history and its effects at UC San Diego, as well as some of the political science pieces of it. So we're really excited to be here with you. As mentioned, we both teach AP Government. I also have a law academy at my school, and so I teach a freshman intro class and a junior senior capstone class. So all the stuff we're going to share are things that we've used at varying levels in college prep and in AP with freshmen and with seniors and juniors and sophomores. So we're hoping to make it really accessible to you and also to fit in the parameters of what your teaching year looks like and the time that you have available. And so that's sort of where we're coming from. But we also know that none of us is as smart as all of us. So we really welcome your questions, your comments, your thoughts, and your interactivity because we are all embarking on this new crazy COVID journey together.
Sunshine, it looks like so far from the responses we're getting that most of the teachers responding are doing fully remote instruction, but it's live instruction. So they have the synchronous scenario, and that's going to open up more opportunities to use the vast majority of the materials that we have available, because even ones that would require, more teacher guidance and so on, they'd be able to do live online. So that's going to be great as far as the resources that we can use. All right. Let's
finishing my answer while you talk. All right, so we thought we'd start just by letting you guys kind of digest and decompress a little bit some of the things that you're thinking about already. What are you excited to do, or what, and we asked in the chat as well, what are you still thinking about, or what were you motivated and inspired by, and how are you going to use this? And then we'll give you some of the thoughts that we had to maybe augment what you had in mind. But oftentimes when I go to stuff like this, I like to talk as well as listen. And sometimes I like to start by, oh, this is what I had in mind. So we're all, again, the kind of teachers that would come in an afternoon or evening to do something like that. So I assume we all sort of share that bent a little bit. So, and Shoshana is as well. So we thought, as you can see on the slide, that we'd have you start out by, again, going just into breakout rooms, and you can choose which one you'd like based on how you'd best use it, and maybe chat a little bit with each other as to what you're already thinking about or areas you're already thinking you want to go.
They're all pretty fun.
Yes.
Okay.
Although we have a small enough squad, maybe we should just chat in here rather than make an effort to go.
That might actually work, Sunshine. I think it would be good for us to continue talking here if people are willing to do so. Do you think?
So, okay. So what are some things that have already been kind of percolating in anyone's head who's willing to be the first to unmute and share and break the seal of us? I know we saw doing a paper on the judicial branch, which is really cool to use it, and relevancy of what's going on in the country. Is that right now, Emperador Bonifacio? So our
also teaching at the community college level, but having students who are high school students for dual enrollment. So we've got some range of what people are teaching. So
anyone? We can keep talking too, but is anyone willing to? Would love to hear some thoughts about where you're kind of preliminarily thinking you might go with this.
I'll weigh in that if we were going to the rooms, I would have gone to room 3 because I think the decisions in this case in particular are just so instructive and illustrative of what you can do with Supreme Court opinions and sort of the juxtaposition of the court basically flipping, but you've seen the trend from the dissent then become the majority and what that means and how the court sort of weaves those two together. And I think what you see in the second case, Justice Jackson really taking on sort of explaining and going through a very reasoned explanation as to why the court is changing its mind, essentially. So for me, the sort of using this as an example of how to read Supreme Court decisions and what to look for, I think is really interesting.
I love that too. And the idea of, I think kids often want to just skip over the dissent. Well, that's not really part of it. What was decided. The dissent is just sour grapes from somebody who didn't get their way. And this is such a perfect example of how it can shape and craft future stuff. And in the full packet that you guys put together, the EBA and made available, and that was Winston, so he's with us today, there's such a great element in there about what happened in those intervening 2 years and what some of the passions were coming out of Govitis on the dissent side that led to that change over time, that it wasn't an accident, that it comes back and that we see this shift. So as well as the actual language itself of the dissent to the majority opinion, heads up to you guys, if you haven't seen yet the full packet, it is thick, but it is beautifully written. It is really worth a great read. It is entertaining and enjoyable, and it has great segments to pull out for kids to provide both that historical context and this understanding that these justices are real people. And it doesn't always stop with the dissent. Sometimes it's, no, I felt really strongly about this, and how can we create change the next time something like this comes before us, which is also so great to springboard, not just in free speech, but in all sorts of other things. And of course, on the freedom of religion side, right, we're seeing all these conversations around Oregon v. Smith again this year, and where does that go? So speaking of tying to current events, I think this is a great way to package that in a way that's super understandable. They decided one thing, and then this happened, and then 2 years later they decided something else, and then to go into the things that are more kind of nuanced and complex.
Yeah, I think the most important thing for me is to illustrate the change over time, that this was a point in time, and the cases previous to and since then have also reflected the changing values that the country has established. And they really don't see the judges as real people. And the materials that you obviously are going to provide will help understand the different points of view, and that they can change their mind. I mean, I think they see them as truly just the robe and not the individual. And that's so great. I like them being able to read and see and think and respond. All of that is tied up in this program. It's wonderful.
I really agree with you about the sort of humanizing the justices and how, you know, we don't really have robots here who are making legal decisions. We have people, you know, doing their level best, but there's still that human element. And so that is a really fun part. I have to remember a specific resource that I want to point out to you, since you want your students to get that I think will be useful to you a little bit later. I probably would have gone to room 4, because the class I've taught most in my career has been world history, and my students just kind of zone out when we're, you know, it's like war after war, emperor after emperor, and so on, and they kind of, you know, it's you know, dead people, so why are we studying them? And if I start talking about protest or dissent or rebellion or revolution and bring it closer to home, they perk up. So, you know, if we're looking at, you know, the Chinese Revolution or the French Revolution or whatnot, and then I say, what would happen in our country if, and we start talking about the legal elements of that, then they really get into it. So I think I would probably be tempted to sort of talk about the civil disobedience level and the changes that that brings, and also just the, you know, immense blessings that we have, how fortunate we are that we can petition and protest and make changes, and that our personal freedoms are so protected to do that. So I probably would have gone to room 4, but I want to move on to our resources. So let's see, here we go. Yes. Okay. That looks perfect.
Okay.
So for our classes, oh, Sunshine, did you want to talk?
Go ahead.
Okay. For our classes, we really try to emphasize current events. And that can be, you know, you have to watch out for landmines, but current events are the fastest way to get the students to recognize that these are not, you know, dusty tomes and irrelevant historical lessons or judicial lessons that we're looking at, but that these are relevant to our daily lives and the freedoms that we enjoy now. Sunshine has resources that are excellent for looking at that are very, very current. She's going to introduce those. Because I am right now hybrid, so I have students about 10% of the week in person, and then the rest of the time they're doing work online. I have moved my current events conversations to Flipgrid. And I do have a resource to sort of show you guys what that looks like. It has actually proven really useful. And so I'll show you that in a minute. But I do want Sunshine to be able to introduce some of her more recent news articles that she has collected.
Before we get there, front load this a little bit. We're going to share this out in just a minute. Kathy's going to push it out in the chat. Because when I go to things like this as the attendee, I want stuff I can plug and play into my classroom, but also that works for what I'm doing. So what we thought, rather than give you a prescribed couple, here is this, we give you some options, and all of these are customizable. And when you make them better, please email us and let us know, hey, this is how I improved it. This is how this is even better than what you came up with. Because again, with the idea, none of us is as smart as all of us. But also sometimes I do feel like I go not to the ABA and FJC events because they're great, but other ones where people think I have 5 students in my class and all year to teach them one thing. And while I would love to teach this all year, we are all of us constrained, of course, by the fact that, you know, we can't just skip a branch of government and be like, cool, you're good, right? Go be voters and citizens forever. And, you know, how about that Congress? So we never have as much time as we want. So we thought it would be maybe most helpful to you to menuize this a little bit. So as you can see, there's, if you have a day, if you're going to have a day plus homework, or if you have several days to spend, that's how we broke this down. And some of it, of course, depends on how long a day is for you, how many students you have, where they're at. But at least it gives you a rough sense of, for us, how we conceptualize each of these lessons in terms of the time they take. And then we also put this code in of, is this only in person? Does it work for hybrid? Does it work for distance? And then just a little bit of some notes to give you more ideas. And again, this is available to you. It's all hyperlinked to the lessons themselves. We're going to spotlight some of them. But it's our hope that somewhere in there, you find even one thing that's helpful to you, because again, I always feel like if I leave with one thing that I didn't have before, it was time well spent. So we hope you'll find more than one, but at least maybe one would be beneficial. And we're really doing this. So my teaching setting right now, I just started week 2 of hybrid, but it's synchronous. So I'm zooming in all of the kids that are at home on a given day, plus teaching live to the kids that are in front of me. So I'm basically just failing all day long. Like, hold on, let me repost that. Wait, are you here? Wait, let me readmit you. Wait, stop doing that. So it's been an adventure, and it's, I think, the hardest version of this we've done yet. But I came out of live teaching remote, like most of you are, since the beginning of the school year and also last year. So I've done that too. So these are all things that I have done, or Shoshana has done, in the models that we're using right now. So that's also a way that we hope it will be to your benefit. But starting with current events, because it is something we both do really, really love, and we all know, right? How do you hook kids? You connect it to them. What is it like in their life? Why does it matter that we study this? Because, you know, the phrase I use all the time in class is, the history of the world doesn't begin when you begin paying attention to it. Right? It started earlier than that. And you need to know where these stories started so that you understand the context of what you're living right now. Okay, so the top one is something that I use with my higher level students, although I could adapt it to my freshmen. I just worry about maturity levels and being able to really contextualize it, but it definitely could be done. The bottom one is one that I use with my freshmen, or the middle one, but could scaffold up to my juniors and seniors. So this one is in teachers with things like BLM posters in the back of their Zooms. And there's a case from Texas, a case from Alabama, and a case from Los Angeles County to, again, try to illustrate to students, this is happening all over. What are some of the differences? But also, again, to put it into context. So we start, as you can see, with these articles. But then I have them read, here's an overview of teacher free speech rights. And here is the case that's on point, is Garcetti v. Ceballos, that is not great for teachers. If it's a case you're not familiar with, it dealt with a different public employee. And the Supreme Court has not clarified what does that mean about teachers and what teachers can and can't do. And then, you know, for those couple of us that are from California, California Ed Code includes an affirmative obligation to combat bias. And then our district this summer adopted a resolution condemning racism. And if your district or your school, your state Ed Code doesn't have that, you could leave that part out. But what we did is first we read the articles and just discussed them. Then we read the precedent and tried to decide how does that or doesn't that apply to teachers. And then we looked at, well, what other obligations do we have on the other side of that? That maybe this isn't just teachers showing their personal opinion, that it's teachers executing their obligation to combat bias. And then we can kind of connect that to the flag salute and say, this is all an unbroken line. Is it different what a student does in school versus what a teacher does in school? Is there a difference between something that is overtly, arguably political versus something that is an act of patriotism? But isn't it an act of patriotism to have an inclusive message? Where do you draw those lines? Does the line get drawn between the opinion being expressed or the person expressing it? So again, pivoting from why do we study these old cases? Because that's kind of the start that then draws us a line to tinker, that draws us a line to some of these other cases. And again, gets them thinking beyond just their little perspective about the flag salute. And then as well, and we'll come back to this in a minute, but because so many of them in recent years, of course, have had strong opinions about athletes kneeling to start games as an expression of patriotism. And this is another obvious way of entry. Why do we study flag salutes? Well, what's the difference between a student not saluting the flag in school and an athlete not standing at attention or not, you know, with their hand over their heart before their game? So that gives us a lot of directions to go as well. And then, because of course, our teenagers do love to talk about themselves and their rights. So if students have rights in schools, how does that or doesn't that connect to a dress code? Is saluting the flag the same as wearing a MAGA hat or not? And so this is just a collection of different articles. And there is one about Tinker v. Des Moines, again, for kids that don't have that context, because as I said, I use this with my freshmen and they haven't heard of Tinker yet. Where does free speech start? And then does it discriminate against girls? Also a hot topic, right? And then this one, the last one is girls can't wear pants because they need to show, we need to have chivalry and respect, which, as you can imagine, leads to just some really glorious conversations. So this is the kind of thing that I jigsaw with the kids in groups, and this works great in breakout rooms as well as in person. I put the links on Google Classroom. You're each in this group, read this one, discuss it, and then I mix up the groups so that they're doing the same way we would do in our physical space classroom. But again, linking to, it's not just about, are you saluting the flag or not? What does that look like now that we've resolved the flag salute issue? Why does that still matter? And because for most of them, they'll hear about Tinker and will return to Tinker in AP Gov if they get there, but they don't get, that wasn't the first time a student made a statement in school that, again, these things start sooner, and that we have in Goodbye to Burnett the seeds that eventually bloom kind of into Tinker, and then we go from there. So it's, again, this attempt to place the things that they're fired up about right now, like, can I wear my Lulus to school, in the context of, you're not the first students in the history of the world to ever care about what you could or couldn't do at school.
Sure. And for the Flipgrid assignment, I included the instructions that I give to my students, just so if any of you wish to use Flipgrid with your students for current events conversations, that you could use those same instructions. And then Sunshine, I'm not able to control it, but if you could scroll down.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And then essentially I have an explicit instruction for them regarding the type of current event that I want them to find. And so they're looking for relevant news stories. So, you know, and for this one, I probably would open it up to, you know, not just in the last few months, but in the last few years. So I would probably see some stories about athletes kneeling. I would probably see some stories about bakers not baking wedding cakes, and other similar scenarios where, because of people's deeply held beliefs, they are bucking the system, or in some way refusing to do what's expected of them. And so I have pretty specific instructions for my students where I want them to, you know, share their article with us, tell us the headline, address media bias. And that's so that they're tying in other elements that we've talked about in class. I also want students to be sort of self-aware when they're bringing in current events from news sources. Since I require them to name the source and to address the media bias, because we've already done some media bias activities, then it kind of prompts them to self-discipline to not choose the craziest source they can possibly find, because they don't want to end up, you know, saying, and this one was rated as, you know, a garbage source by all sides, you know? So that can be helpful. And one thing that you have the option of as an educator with Flipgrid is students can comment on each other's articles with questions, with videos. So it's up to you if you want to allow that. But I was really surprised. I thought, since students don't really like to turn on their cameras on Zoom, that I wouldn't get a lot of buy-in on Flipgrid, but this is the Snapchat generation. And so they are perfectly happy to make videos of themselves talking about current events and explaining it. I tell them to explain it like they're talking to someone who doesn't really know that much about how the law works or how government works. And it's been a really successful tool for me.
And I've been impressed with how intuitive it is, because when it first came out, when we first started hearing about it, it was the, oh, one more program. But my son, who's in 6th grade now, started using it last year and didn't need to ask me for help one time as a 5th grader. So the kids really get it. And again, seem to like that they're posting video comments to each other instead of doing it in writing. So this idea of go on somebody else's and comment on that or comment with video. They love that.
Yes, and it's pretty easy for them to use.
Ooh, interesting.
And we have a comment in the chat about the topics being very controversial, and that really is a challenge. Both Sunshine and I work in very purple areas. So, you know, I'm in Southern California, of course, and so you sort of think, well, more liberal, but I actually teach in a very red district, like deep red. And so there's sort of a confluence of cultural norms and expectations here. And if I just let the students talk unfiltered, we would have a fight. So I've gotten to the point where in our conversations in class, what I model and what I tell my students is that I do not want them to use adjectives, that I don't want them to sort of tell us if something's good or bad. I just want them to share the information and we can decide if we think it's good or bad. And that I also want them to try to moderate their tone of voice so that it's just a very informational tone. And that has been really successful. I do, you know, occasionally have students who really struggle with the tone of voice. But even when, you know, I'm not there to monitor, they're making these videos on their own on Flipgrid. They've been very successful with keeping a neutral tone and neutral language.
And what I add on to that, and I'm sure you do too, is the sign of a mature intellectual is the ability to disagree without being disagreeable. And that puts the onus on them, right? So, because they all want to think that they're grown up. So if you're grown up, prove it, right? And discuss. If you are smart, prove it and discuss it and disagree without being disagreeable. And I have not had a lot of problems. My one thing this year being on Zoom is I have in a couple classes turned off the chat when we're going to talk about anything controversial, because they will put stuff in the chat because it feels like the internet that they would not unmute and say. And so forcing you can say it, but you've got to unmute and say it. You can't just throw these zingers in there. And I also then don't have to worry about, are you one-on-one messaging someone on the underground? But other than that, I have been doing current events and really wading into pretty controversial stuff my whole career, and it's been okay. But there are definitely some issues more than others where we front load with, okay, these are the phrases and words that are not allowed as a part of this discussion. This is how we are going to address this, again, without the hyperbolic language or without the sort of subjective language attached to it. But of course, current events might not be the only thing you do, especially if you're teaching something like history. So we do have other options for you as well that are, again, so the next set of staff or category things that are more geared toward legal analysis. And this one, the first one is a pretty straightforward template for legal analysis that you can use for any case. And I got this from some of the legal professionals that are partners in our law academy who said, look, this is how we briefed every case in law school. So one of the real gifts you could give your kids is teaching them to brief this way now, so that they're a little more prepared. How do you break it down? So as you can see, it's very, very simple. And I got this from, I modeled it from a handout that Berkeley Law School has that's linked with a little more depth. But just quickly, this is what I want you to do. I also use this when they're analyzing articles for current events. I just modify the directions a little bit as a quick one-page way to break down what is this case about and why does it matter. So this is one option. And then for AP Gov, because we have the 15 cases that they have to know inside and out, Shoshana has a different system that I'm going to pull up that also would work for both Gobetis and Barnett, of course, because it works for any case you want kids to analyze.
Thank you, Sunshine. You know what? I'm wondering, while we're talking about this, if in a minute, if you could pull up one of the other cases that I have the SCOTUS summary sheet for, so that they can see my terrible drawing. So essentially, I have a link in this document for students so that they can read the Bill of Rights Institute's summary of the case. And what I require them to do is to summarize in bullet points the facts of the case, the central constitutional question or questions, the decision the court made, and most importantly, what was the legal basis of that decision. And then I have them draw something, and then I get to make fun of them for their crazy drawings. So the reason that I structure it this way is because for the AP writing that they have to do about Supreme Court cases, this is sort of the information that they're asked, minus the drawing, of course, which is just a memory aid. That they will always be asked to compare the facts of a case that they're required to know with a case that has just been introduced to them. So they really do need to know sort of the background info. And then the central constitutional question will often be addressed directly or indirectly at some point in the FRQ, and they certainly will need to know the legal basis of the decision, and will compare or contrast that with the legal basis of another decision. So essentially just to prep them for the writing that they have to do. That's why I structure it this way. And my students have told me for the last couple of years that reviewing these, which are their worksheets that they have, reviewing these before the AP test has been very useful to them as they're going into the AP test and prepping. Sunshine, do you want to show us one of my filled out ones with the ugly?
Are we looking at it?
No.
In this particular one?
In the, yeah. Oh, no, we're not looking at the Tinker one yet.
Okay. Sorry, I thought I pulled it up while you were talking, but it
No
may
problem.
just be stuck on the
It
other
might
one.
be glitching on my side. Oh, there we go. Okay, perfect. So for my fellow educators here, essentially what I do to show them what I expect as far as their summary of any case they're looking at is I've made up a ridiculous Supreme Court case having to do with myself and my issues with the state of California. And this is a ridiculous case, but my students find it to be fairly plausible because I'm notoriously a terrible driver. So essentially I make up the facts of the case, I make up the central constitutional question and the decision of the court, and then I have a horrible stick figure drawing. And that way they can essentially see what the expectations are. So, you could use a real case if you wanted to show them sort of a model to emulate, or you could do as I did and make up a silly one about yourself. But this has proven pretty effective for us.
And then, all right, I'm gonna go back here to my other one. So, yay. Okay. And then, speaking of the AP course exam and the Gov exam and that's on the next one, actually. Never mind, I thought it was on this one. So just kidding. And then wanting to use the flag salute cases to do either one of these, we've also linked the FJC's PowerPoint that's already done for you. So you don't even have to make something from what you heard last week, right? Good people at FJC have done the work and created a whole PowerPoint for you to use with pictures and facts and all the things. So again, if you wanted students, rather than diving right into the majority opinion, to have some of this background and be able to, again, either jigsaw or go through it on their own before they started looking at the majority opinion and using either one of those tables or both to evaluate it, then this is available to them as well.
Sunshine, I think if I had limited time and I wanted my students, let's say I had a class period and then just one evening for homework, I probably would do that PowerPoint as a short lecture and then give one of the other activities, one of the analysis activities later. Just because I think it's such a great, fast, efficient, and interesting introduction to the case. So I probably would start there.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree. All right, then now we want to apply it. Now that we've looked at it a little bit and analyzed it, what else do we want to do with it if we're talking now about teaching this more directly rather than the current events? How would we draw a through line from that to now? So this is a SCOTUS comparison question. So it's using the AP format, although as those of you who are AP Gov teachers can see, it's longer than what they'll get on the AP exam. And honestly, that's mostly because I really, really love this majority opinion. And I cannot limit myself in which part of it I share because I think it is so well written and just such an absolute American treasure of a legal opinion. But it also gives them more to work with is the other reason that I give them something longer, because it takes a while in AP Gov and any other writing class, of course, to get kids to figure out how do you do compare and contrast well. Well, the more stuff you have to pull from, the more avenues that they have to work with. So as you can see, and again, this is something you're welcome to use or make it even better and then share with me. It takes Barnett and then links it to Tinker. And again, exactly the style that they would be asked to do on the AP Gov exam, with Tinker being a case that they know and Barnett being a case that they know less well. How can you draw these through lines to it? And so this is one that, again, is if you want to use it quickly, it's going to be with students who already know what it is you expect of them. But I have done this with my freshmen as well. Because I like to, given that I have the advantage of having them as freshmen and then back again as seniors, I try to do some building blocks so that when we come back to it in AP Gov, at least some of the kids in the class know what they're supposed to do. I just do it with a lot more talking ahead of time. So they look at part A and then they make some notes and then we discuss it and then they write. And then we look at part B and they take some notes and we discuss it and then they write, and then part C, and then we go back and rewrite it and make it even better. So this is something that, although it is designed for AP Gov, it can be used even in an introductory freshman class to success, especially because it's so high interest. And that's one of my favorite things about these cases and using them, because it's about kids and the rights kids have and patriotism and things that our students tend to feel pretty passionately about. And so it's such a great vehicle for them to start digging in a little bit more to the Supreme Court.
This is definitely an accessible case. Sunshine, can you go back to that just for 1 second? Because I
Sure.
want to just mention that this year, because we don't have, the same time in person, it's been a challenge. But for the majority of the teachers who are here, you guys said that you're teaching live, but distanced. So one thing that worked for me before I went to hybrid, when I was doing all distanced, is for teaching live, if you're able to do Zoom with your students, is I had students choose partners and I put them with partners in a breakout room so that they could together write their first couple of FRQs for each writing style. So I would recommend, if you're going to have students start writing about Supreme Court cases or analysis of the case, letting them do it in partners is such a great way for them to reinforce one another's positive habits. If I tell students in general, you can work with a partner during this distance learning time, what I'll get is one person doing the work and sharing it with the other person, which is maybe not really what we're aiming for. But with the Zoom breakout rooms, what I tell them is, if you stay with me on Zoom for writing, because, for my students, it was a choice, I'll let you work with a partner. And then they can essentially raise their hand from their breakout room and I can go help them if they are struggling with part of the prompt. I also would recommend, if possible, after students have written one, that you can have them self-score with you. So you're sort of walking them through, what were the targets, what were we looking for in this answer, and so on. So that has worked pretty well for me.
The other way I've done it to try to make the work equitable is I do swap and glow up. So one person writes A and one person writes B on one Google Doc in one color. And then the person who wrote A goes to B and rewrites and improves it in a different color. And the person who wrote B goes to A and rewrites and improves it. And then I can really see, what did each partner add and where did they start? So it avoids a little bit that, okay, I know you're smarter than I am, so you just write it and I'll just kind of free ride off of it, and I'll correct a couple typos and say we did equitable work. So that, and the glow up being, kind of their phrase, then they can go, oh, wait, I know what that's supposed to mean. So, and I've done that as well as in partners in 4s or 3s as well. Add on, make it better. There's still more out there. How can you continue to improve it? So that is something, and that's worked well. I did that last spring when I was reviewing all on Zoom for the AP exam. I did a fair amount of that. We start with the prompt, you tackle it, now make it better, make each other's work better, and kind of collaborate on that. Okay. All right, so the next thing we have to offer, since of course we don't just deal with the written stuff, but also with multiple choice, and we want to have good, high quality multiple choice, Shauna developed this to be a resource for you all as well.
Yes, so I have excerpts here from news articles, interviews, Library of Congress materials from the Gobitis and the Barnett case. And I wanted to provide you with multiple choice that you could use, that's stimulus-based multiple choice questions that you could use with your students. And where's our teacher? Oh yes, our community college teacher. I wanted to provide this to you because I think there are a couple of questions in here that sort of ask the students about, okay, you know, justices aren't supposed to have any bias or prejudice for or against, but what could have influenced this decision? You know, what about the setting of the time period could have influenced the decision? And these are not particularly challenging questions, but just essentially getting them to interact with the reading. Now, I will say, oh, sorry, I'm in the dark. Hold on. I will say that some of the excerpts, especially from majority decisions, which I know Sunshine's going to talk about a little bit more because she has more materials for you on that. Some of the excerpts can be challenging to read. My student population is a high percentage of my students have more than one language. And so the academic vocabulary can really be a stickler for them. So it can be an area where they get stuck. So what I would recommend is either if you're using this with students who have a reading comprehension challenge, or they're younger, or they have multiple languages, to either read through the excerpts with them. You could also audio record yourself reading it so that they're kind of getting that support. Or you can, for words that are either challenging vocabulary words or are used in a way that will be novel to them, use brackets to insert definitions, which is what I often do in my test questions if I'm not going to be able to be in person with the students when they are taking a multiple choice test. So I have enough excerpts in there that I'm hoping it will be useful to you.
And then if we're thinking about application, not just directly of this case, but where might we go with it? This is actually a project that I created when I did go to the Summer Institute with my group there that I then updated because that was a couple years ago to fit. So this is if you really wanted to go in depth with this in a little bit more time than you might have available, because it is longer, but it does have in it some learning objectives, and compelling questions. And there also are several different options. So this is again one that you can shop as you wish. It's a buffet. Take what you want and leave the rest, but this can be parsed down into other things. So there is an interview component if you're interested in doing that. There's also a look at the terrorist component, which really struck some of my fellow teachers at the Institute. There are these acts of terrorism following Gobitis, and maybe they weren't called that, but that's what they were, right? These kind of terrorist attacks. And so again, using that word in multiple contexts, speaking of using words in ways that are unfamiliar. So this first task works on that, but there also, and there's video resources, as you can see, and article resources that link to that and provide some background that, again, you can draw this line to Barnett from. Then there's a broader question about tolerance and what does that do with us if you want to get really sort of meta-social science-y with it and using the opinion for its larger implications. And then this idea of compelling patriotic exercises. Does it make you patriotic or not if you have to do it? Does it promote or not patriotism? Just getting them into some of the bigger issues. And again, some featured resources for that. And then this one is my favorite, and my real life college prep government students are actually doing this week, and starting tomorrow. So we have a variety of images here, as you can see, from different groups across different time periods in the United States. And what I ask them to do is rank each of them. How patriotic is this image on a scale of 1 to 10? And discuss that with groups. And then they have to decide which two are the most patriotic and which two are less patriotic or unpatriotic. So they can decide if they want to say, no, they're all patriotic. Okay, which ones are less patriotic and which ones are more patriotic and why? And then defend those assertions. So we're taking positions, defending positions, but also thinking about this broader idea of patriotism and what makes something patriotic. Is protesting the government unpatriotic, or is it the most patriotic thing you can do in the context of America and American patriotism? And then there's a summative task if you wanted to do all of this and put it all together. So again, this is, and then some informed action. How would you extend that out into the community? So this is a big thing that you wouldn't have to do all of, that you also can just chop. Here's one piece of it. And thank you. And it's really fun to see what they come up with. And you have one kid's thing that's the most patriotic is another kid's, this is unpatriotic, and it creates these great discussions and also surrounding, well, what do then we call patriotism? What does it mean to be an American? And giving them these big ideas that are going to be applicable to anything else we discuss as social scientists, and also in something like a world history class as well, thinking about nationalism and patriotism and what's the difference, and how does American patriotism, connect to or differ from patriotism in other places, or how can we use our understanding of American patriotism to influence our understanding of these world events in other places that maybe we haven't been. And the other thing I like about this is, as a lot of us know, we teach everyone who walks in the door. And so you end up, as Shoshana mentioned, right, with a wide variety of languages, experiences, home lives, but also you have the kid that should be in AP and is qualified academically to be in AP and is choosing not to for whatever reason. And you have the kid who is there because they have to be, with the hoodie on and the Cheetoed hands and the headphones in, who's like, oh, the AirPods aren't on. You're like, yeah, but you're still telling me you don't want to talk to me. Mm-hmm. And how do you come up with stuff that reaches all of those kids, or at least gives all of them a forum? And so that's another reason I like to use these pictures. They feel like no matter who you are, hopefully one of them, there's something in there for you that kind of sparks some interest or some desire to know more. And some of these stories are things they know nothing about. And so it's been really gratifying to have kids go, well, I didn't know about, this more current stuff, of course they know about, but, I had no idea about this protest, or I had no idea this Native American occupation of Alcatraz. That's not real. Miss Cal, go look it up. All right, go look it up. Go be excited about that. Or so.
Sunshine, I really like that that activity, and I think I absolutely agree. It would be super useful in a world history class, in a U.S. history class. In world history, we get to talk about, where do you draw the line between patriotism and nationalism, right? Mm-hmm. Because hopefully by toward the end of modern world history, they kind of get the idea that nationalism might not be totally a force for good. It might have caused some problems historically. And so, then they try to balance, because they think, well, I'm patriotic, but those people are nationalistic, and that's why they had those issues, So that would be a really fun one to do.
That's what I really love. I'm super excited. So I saved it for this week before Thanksgiving, when we're all kind of a little fried, thinking, okay, what are we really going to get fired up about? And then we'll go from there. And this is just a potpourri of other stuff, other ways you might use this. And again, with some variety in time lengths. Most of these are shorter. And so this is, if you want to do Burn Epi, you want to do one fun thing or one more thing to go deeper or practice another skill. These are things that can be done quickly. So we use, and probably many of you do as well, in our department, two different ways to analyze visual objects or informational graphics or text. So optic is what we use in our department for stuff that's visual. And this is something you could do with any of those pictures of students saluting the flag with the Bellamy salute, aka, as my students said today, wait, they're doing the Heil Hitler. Why are they doing the Heil Hitler? Oh, boy, are you glad you came to school today. You're about to find out. All right, and so using any of those pictures, this would work for that. And so this is just the way, it's more in depth than the other one. So don't be spazzed if you see and you're like, wait, that's too much, I can't do that. And the other one's shorter. But this is a longer, more in-depth way to really look at visual work. And for students in any kind of course where they're going to have that, like AP Euro, AP US, right? Less Gov, but a little bit more. And just interpreting pictures. How would you do that? And I left this in here, even though we don't have any cartoons in this content, because I already created it. We might as well share with you. If I would use the blue text if they were analyzing a cartoon, and the red text here if they're analyzing a photograph, to help them really look into it and again contextualize this with their understanding. And then hippos, as I said, is shorter, and this can be used for images. It also can be used for documents or songs or any kind of infographic. And this is, and just my the girl that teaches next door, actually, right over there, and I are pretty into what are the acronyms we can give kids that are memorable so they remember all the things they're supposed to do. And so HIPPOs is historical context, intended audience, point of view, and so on and so forth, which you can read. So what I have here are the questions that we have them use for analysis. And then the green are activities that they can do with this stuff. I use this a fair amount for songs in a variety of contexts, protest songs, etc. I modified this to be for documents because for this case, obviously that would be the most impactful if you wanted to have them do this for any kind of analysis of the majority opinion, of the pictures, of the letter from Billy Gobitis or anything else you might find. And then these are just ways to apply historical context and understand. So this would be if you wanted to go a lot deeper and spend more time. The blue would be if you're doing a quick overview. Hey, how about that picture? How do I look at it and consider it? The green would be if you wanted to do a little bit more. And this is my favorite if you're so inclined for intended audience. And I have other models of these depending on when the time frame is of what I want them to analyze. I think about real people who would have been varying ages when this came out. And I give, as you can see, a little bit of their backstory. And then the kids have to decide, how do they think that person would have felt about this image or object and why? You can think about how does audience matter and why does audience matter? And are we being intentional in thinking about our audience, which I hope doesn't just help them analyze, but also to think about in their own writing. Who is their audience and why should that be directed toward this? So you can see we've got President Nixon and Betty Friedan and Woody Guthrie and Norman Rockwell on here, but they don't know that yet. It's just the names, but I do, you can use hypothetical people as well. I just like to have the real people because then it branches into some different conversations. And I try to use a variety of contexts for the people so that they would have probably different reactions to it to get the kids to think more. And of course, I don't discourage them. If you want to find out more about who Norman Rockwell is to help you decide whether or not he would have liked this picture of the flag salute, rock on, right? But if not, this gives you enough that you can maybe come up with a guess for that.
Okay. And
go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say that these are some of the activities that I was saying earlier, that if you had limited time, it might be worth it to use the FJC PowerPoint that we had, and then follow it up with one of these activities, because it would be a nice way to get them engaging with information. Another thing is one of my very, very favorites is when a teacher in a different discipline and our worlds collide. So sometimes, you know, when I'm talking about government and politics, or when I'm talking about world history, I will overlap with our statistics teacher or our sociology teacher or our language arts teacher if they're doing argumentation or they're doing analysis of nonfiction. Sometimes we'll both be on Letter from a Birmingham Jail at the same time. Or even, you know, sometimes having to do with environmental law, our AP environmental science teacher. So if there's something where you have a teacher in another department who, you know, you talk to, you could potentially even say, hey, I'm thinking of doing this. Would you be interested in doing this activity with it? Probably the language arts teachers would be the easiest connection if you have language arts teachers who are working on argumentation or analysis of nonfiction texts. But it's really nice when the students get that crossover between disciplines.
Absolutely. And then this is just a super short, like I mentioned in the chat at the beginning, I love, and this was, I saw Professor Capsola when I was at the Institute before and seeing it again, it just reminded me how intrigued I was the whole time. Are you patriotic? How do you know? How do you prove it? And so this is my intro to talking about patriotism and are these images patriotic or not lesson, and talking about Barnett. So I put up these questions that are, again, these are the same ones that we saw from Professor Capsola last week, and then this is mine, right? What requirements should exist regarding the pledge? So I have them just write some thoughts about that and then do a quick discussion in a breakout room or with someone sitting nearby. And then I've got these 4 images and they do, right, even quicker visual analysis. What do you see? What do you wonder? So what are your thoughts? What do you see from that? And then always, right, what comes up is, why are they saluting the flag like that? But I also really like this collection of images because, as you can see, they're all within 2 years of each other. They're from different spots in the country, but every single flag salute is happening a little bit differently. And that, I think, is fascinating to kids, given how universal the experience is now. No matter where you are, we all kind of do this, right? Ready, begin. And we go, we all do the same thing, but that's not necessarily the case in these images. And then they want to know why. And then they go, oh, let's find out. And this is just this quick, peculiar history of the Pledge of Allegiance article that kids can read. It's a very fast read that they can read. And then what's interesting and what's surprising. And then there's some more deep dives from Smithsonian Mag that have some overlap of information, but also some other things about the history of the pledge, which again is some nice context for them going into studying Barnett and remembering this wasn't a thing that the Barnett's parents had done and their grandparents had done, right? That this is in the early days of this when these cases arise, Barnett and Gobitis, and we're just still figuring out how this works. And then this one is yours, Joe. So
yes. So this one was related to a fairly recent news article about Lillian Gobitis, the young woman in our earlier case. And the news article basically talks about the history of the case sort of from her perspective, and it's a very easy read. I think it would be very accessible for your students regardless of reading level. And then there are some very basic questions that the students could answer. You could assign this as a Google Doc, or depending on what your learning management system is, you could plug it in there as questions to which students would respond. The first question is one that connects to the concept of protest, which again, I do emphasize with my students because it's a real buy-in for them, and them sort of thinking about the actions taken by the Gobitis children and how that qualifies as protest. And then from there, it sort of goes into the ramifications for the family, and also how people sometimes respond, how the majority sometimes responds when we have issues of a minority group, religious or otherwise, who sort of says, I'm not going to participate in this way. And so this would be a short homework assignment for them that they could do after being introduced to the case, or even just on its own, even without any introduction to the case. I usually, when I'm introducing protest as a way that citizens can influence our government, I give a variety of options for students to look at. So they can look at protest through visual art, protest through music, protest through sit-ins, protest through hunger strikes, and so on. So this could be an option that you use as an example of civil disobedience that is a little bit different than the civil rights marches and civil disobedience from the 60s that students automatically go to mentally.
That's one of the things I love about this, Shoshana, is I think when we tell kids, or tell us about protests, that's immediately where they go, either to the BLM thing that they saw when they went to the coffee shop last week, or to the Montgomery bus boycott. And they don't think about, sometimes just sitting in your classroom is an act of protest. Right. And especially in a different time, a different set of social norms, different thing, and thinking about the bravery that's involved. Right. In the middle of wartime, right? To do something like that sometimes these small acts really are resonant. And so I love framing it in that, right? That it all fits as part of this protest.
Yes. And if anyone wants those other resources related to protest, I put my email in the chat so that you could message me directly, and I'd be happy to share any of that with you.
I know we have 1 minute left, so I'm going to use it. We're going bell to bell here, but this is, as I said, I love this majority opinion. Love, love, love. And it is about the text, and it is about, the context of the text. So if we want to get a little more, but I also, want kids to have fun, and I'm trying to reach every kid, the kid who thinks it is fun to read a majority opinion, and the kid that's doing it because he wants to graduate, right? And all the kids in the middle. And so what I did here is I pulled some of my favorite excerpts, some of the things I think are most beautifully written or most widely applicable, and you can see they're varying lengths. So I usually let my students choose, but you could pre-assign, and in that way you could scaffold a little bit for ability level, for language learning, for other factors. And then I have up here this kind of menu of options of different things kids can do with them, or that you can do. And again, you can direct this, or you can allow choice, depending on what you want to do. You can see it's leveled. The Amma crushing it is writing an amicus brief, which clearly is going to be leveled much higher than making the TikTok. So you can use it sort of where your students are, what your resources are, et cetera. All of these can be done in a Zoom format as well as in a live format. And if it's not immediately clear how to do that, I did put some kind of note on here, and you notice it says like Zoomer edition, right? This is how I would do it in a Zoom. And you can see the red is if you just want to do it quickly, and the blue is if you want to extend it and make it take a little longer. And some of the stuff are things you guys have done before, like Four Corners, et cetera. And a few maybe are a little newer, like I was not TikToking about anything before last year, but that's again, kind of like the fifth grade. It's something that immediately resonates. Oh, they know how to make a TikTok, right? So, and it's fun for them. And again, putting what images would go with this? How would you present this? How would you read it for maximum effect, et cetera, gets them to dive into and apply the language a little bit more. And one of my very favorites, because I do like the visual component of it, is this picture's worth a SCOTUS quote, having them come up with what modern picture would fit one of these quotes. And then, when we're live, they just tape it up around the room and we do a gallery walk. Now they just put it in a Google slideshow. And then I have them, okay, go on and do the one above yours and the one below yours and comment on it, is the digital version of gallery walk. That's one that, again, I really enjoy. I do that with a variety of documents too. So it works with majority opinion text. We do it with George Washington's farewell address. It's one we return to a lot because, again, that drawing those lines. What's going on now and where is it rooted in history? Oh, and speaking of history, I'm over our time. So a pox on our head. But we hope, again, you found something in here that's useful for you. But please do keep in touch and let us know how you used it and how you made it even better. And we hope this is beneficial to you, and yay for patriotism and the First Amendment and getting paid to talk about it. What? And thank you, of course, to the FGC and ABA for making these extraordinary resources in the first place, so that it's so easy for us to use it and make it work in our classroom without a whole lot of leveling and just getting to do the fun part of how do we want to use this in an engaging way.
Thank you, Sunshine. Thank you, Shoshana. It was wonderful.
Absolutely.
You shared a ton of fabulous resources, and we look forward to getting the recording of this program and all of your resources out to various networks. And thank you to everyone who's joined us for this program and last week as well.
Absolutely. And again, if you click on the link in the chat that Shoshana shared, it pops up that first grid, and every single thing that we just showed you is hyperlinked in that one Google Sheet. So that's the easiest way. But
You did an excellent job. It was fabulous. There's so much. I just had to process it all.
I know.
So thanks for everything.
absolutely.
You are welcome. Thank you for being here with us.
Yeah, it was great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to Christine and the FJC for being such continued great program partners on these programs.
Yes.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Bye.
You
Bye,
too.
all. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.